This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. You know how sometimes you say, hey, I'm talking to the king of such and such or the queen of this, and I am literally right now talking to the queen of cold calling, Wendy Weiss. Welcome to the summit.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be here today.
So, consultants and cold calling, no, not so much. If anything, I would say consultants and professional service providers probably have the most misunderstood conception of what cold calling is and could be and should be. And they categorically hate it. Now, wait, even if they've never tried it. So, unpack some of the mindset craziness for people that are in a consulting or a trusted advisor mode and why they hate it so much and how we're going to start to shift that thinking.
Okay, well, great question. And I will begin by saying that it's probably not your fault that you feel this way because you probably heard a lot of really stupid things about this particular topic. And, one of the things people say is it's about dialing the phone hundreds of times until somebody says yes to you. And it's about going through the no's and the hang-ups until somebody says yes. And really, who in their right mind wants to do that? And people say things like, everybody hates it. And then there's just a handful of people that do like it. And, that's kind of a silly conversation to have because the opposite of hating to cold call is not that you suddenly love it, because that's probably not going to happen. But the opposite is just that you're neutral. This is a business process. It is a business process like any other marketing business process that you might employ to get new clients. And it's simply a way of introducing yourself to the people that you want to meet. And that's very powerful. You get to choose.
So that's very interesting. I love the language that you just used. It's a way to introduce yourself to prospects that you select. So we're not going through the phone book. We're not just randomly cold call spamming strangers. There is a curation and a selection process. And talk a little bit about how you advise your clients. What's the pre-call prep? Because I know when people say cold calling, the immediate impression in people's head is randomly pick up the phone, look at a phone number, pick up a business card on your desk and dial a number. And we don't talk about what needs to happen as prep so that you don't sound like a schmuck when they answer.
Yeah, we are anti-schmuck. And so, a lot of service professionals, consultants are very reactive. They just, whoever comes in the door, that's who we're going to work with. What if instead there was another way that you could simply say, okay, who do I want to do business with? Because the question most consultants or business owners will ask themselves is, well, who wants to do business with me? That's the wrong question. The question is, who do I want to do business with? So you actually start by micro-targeting, not just targeting, but micro-targeting. You take a very narrow focus. This is kind of marketing 101. You take a very narrow focus on your ideal, what makes an ideal prospect for you. You use very concrete objective criteria. Is it a particular industry that you focus on? Do they have to be in a specific geographic location? How large are they? Either by a revenue number, maybe an employee count. So what are the objective criteria that describe an ideal type of target for you? Because when you do this, one, it makes it a lot easier to find them. And then two, it makes it easier to create the messaging that's going to resonate with that kind of target. Three, it makes it more likely that you're actually going to get the client because they are appropriate. They're your ideal type of prospect. And then four, you don't waste your time. So that's where we start. That's always where we start.
Yeah, really, really important. I know that some sales experts are very much hell-bent on scripts. It's all about the script, Wendy. You got to have the script. You have the right script, and everything's going to be peaches and cream. And you teach a very intelligent way to think about what a script is and what a script isn't, and how we can start to, I don't even want to say script, I want to say plan that initial call. What are some myths that you've seen with your clients around this whole concept of, scripting solves everything, just have a script and you can, dominate the cold calling universe?
Well, scripting is very important. It's simply a matter of if you think before you talk, and so that you're prepared. You planned out what you're going to say and what your approach is going to be and what are the questions you're going to ask. But here's the thing. People often say, well, I can't use this script because I can't be myself and I feel phony. And, this is not a creative, emotional process. This is actually direct marketing. So we're looking for, what is the introduction? How are you going to introduce yourself to someone you don't know in such a way that you get their attention and they want to hear what you have to say? Sometimes people will say to me, well, Wendy, I have a script. And I'll say, great. What happens when you use it? Because if you have a script and you use it and you're not getting a good result, your script doesn't work.
Give us kind of a play-by-play of an intelligent cold calling approach that you obviously teach and you've written about. You teach it, you preach it, you have really mastered this. Most people on the receiving end, they have been victimized by terrible, horrible cold calls. Whether it's the insurance industry, whether it's hi, I know your computer has a virus, whether it's, you name the ridiculous thing, big financial companies, big insurance companies, sometimes even technology companies, and of course, a whole bunch of scammers. We're used to being on the receiving end of these terrible, terrible calls. When you teach it and preach it, kind of break down the segments and the parts of the very first thing we say, what not to say, the way that we kind of guide the conversation into a really peer-to-peer discussion.
Absolutely. And so I'll start by saying something that may shock all of our listeners. And that is that consultative selling does not work for prospecting, because you cannot consult with somebody that will not talk to you. So step one is to get the agreement to have a conversation. That's actually my definition of the word appointment, that the prospect agrees to have an in-depth conversation with you. Where that conversation happens, whether one day, again, you'll get in your car and go see people, or you do everything over the phone, or maybe you do a Zoom meeting, that's not as important. What is important is that they agree to have an in-depth conversation with you. So I think of this like dating. There's somebody you want to go on a date with. You don't get to go on the date until you ask them to go on the date with you. So what you are doing when you cold call is you're introducing yourself to a prospect that meets the criteria that you think you would be able to help them. They'd be a good fit for you and you think you can help them. Your goal is to get their attention and get their agreement to have an in-depth conversation with you. And I think that's part of the fundamental misunderstanding of cold calling. Is a lot of people think it's about, hi there, David, give me your credit card now. Hi, David, dump your vendor, hire me.
Getting married on the first date.
Yeah, that's not what we're doing. We're just saying, hey, would you like to go have a cup of coffee or maybe dinner one night? Yeah. That's all we're doing.
So it's really a door opening conversation.
Yes.
And I think is the best outcome, or the way to think about it for a consultant or a trusted advisor, we're really inviting this person, with their permission, of course, we're inviting this person to a conversation about how we might help them.
Exactly.
How long should this initial call be? Because I know people are like terrified, like, oh my God, what if it's a 5-minute call? They're all kinds of crazy terrified around that. What if it's a half-hour call, Wendy? All kinds of terrified about that. What if I'm not ready? What if I'm not prepared? What is the purpose of prospecting call number one?
Get the appointment. And again, the definition of the word appointment is that the prospect agrees to have an in-depth conversation with you. So you're calling to introduce yourself and to ask them to set up a time to talk to you. And again, maybe one day you're going to get in your car and go see people again.
Right.
Maybe today you're going to do everything over the phone or a Zoom meeting. But essentially what you're saying is, I'd like to introduce myself and whatever your company name is. When do you have some time to talk? And you set up a time, another time, to have that conversation. It could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be next month. But they agree to have an in-depth conversation with you. That's what we're trying to do, to enable that conversation.
Right. Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. Talk a little bit about that value statement. When you say who you are and what you do or what kinds of companies you help, a lot of people will either gloss over that, they'll forget that part, and then they wonder why these calls are not successful. Is there a positioning or kind of a value statement that would be highly relevant to that prospect that we need to kind of fabricate for ourselves?
Absolutely. And that's the most important part. If you think about it, calling someone you don't know, there are two things they want to know. They want to know who you are and what do you want. Those are the two things they want to know. So you don't need, how are you today? May I have a moment of your time? Is this a good time for us to talk? All you need is like a sentence that says who you are, and then another sentence that says what you want, which is the appointment. Now, you may have a brilliant value proposition on your website. Maybe you're a marketing consultant. Maybe you hired a marketing consultant and it's on your website and it is brilliant. Do not use it. That is because that was written to be read. It's on your website. That's not how human beings talk. So you need to speak just like yourself. And you have to focus on what's the challenge that these prospects have that you can help them with, and how do they talk about it. And I'll give you a really concrete example from a script that we actually use. One of the markets that we're in is commercial real estate. And in the commercial real estate industry, they will hire new people they're young, they're just out of college, some of them. And the managers in this industry, most of them do not really like to manage. They're running their deals. They don't really want to manage new hires, but they have these new hires. So we call on managers in the commercial real estate industry. And one thing we cannot tell, actually, we don't know if they have teams. We can get all their contact information, but we don't know if they have a team of people or not. So our introduction is, and I have a business development person that does this for me. His name is Tim. He says, we specialize in working with executive managing directors in the commercial real estate industry. We're sick of micromanaging junior brokers who aren't producing. This introduction does two things. One, if they don't have junior brokers, they will just interrupt and say, why are you calling me? I don't have any junior brokers. So they just qualified themselves. I know Tim knows they're not a good fit because we work with the junior brokers. They don't have any. The second thing it does is, because they do not like to manage people, they laugh. And as soon as they laugh, Tim sets an appointment with them because we know our market and we know they don't like to micromanage junior brokers that are not producing. So that's the very simple introduction that we use, and it works beautifully. So the point is, know your market. You got one sentence. Who do you work with? What's the problem that you solve? From their point of view, not from your point of view.
Now, I know I'm channeling our viewers and they're saying, okay, well, phone. We have so many other tools at our disposal here, Wendy. We got LinkedIn, we got email, we got all these other things. How do we support that initial door opening call, or what else can we be doing either before the call, during the call, or after the call, which is the most important thing because that's the micro commitment to get the appointment and have the appointment. Are there some social selling or some electronic tools around the call before, during, or after that you recommend?
Well, I certainly recommend using many of the tools that are available. And I always start with the phone call because you know what? You call someone, they may just pick up the phone. Then you don't have to do all the other stuff.
Right.
But let's say you can't reach them. You dial the phone, you call them, you just keep getting voicemail. Leave a voicemail message. There's actual research that was done at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business a couple of years ago. They tested written communication against spoken communication. So written communication isn't email, it's a text, it's social media,
Right.
it's a letter. And then spoken communication could be when you're face to face with someone, maybe on a Zoom call, on a phone call, or a voicemail if they hear you talk. What they discovered was when people hear you talk, one, first of all, they think you're smarter. And second of all, they're more likely to act on whatever it is you're talking about. So leave them a voicemail. Zoom Info just published a number. It was voicemail in 2020 is returned about 4.8% of the time. And you might say to yourself, well, why bother? But you know what? Over a period of a year, if you're making a lot of phone calls, that could be several hundred returned phone calls. And we see return rates as high as 20% sometimes. So when you do it right, you get people to call you back. Leave a voicemail. Email. If you can't get them on the phone, send them an email. You got their cell number, you could text them. Certainly reaching out to them on LinkedIn or through social media. These are all channels that you can use, but it leads back to you want to talk to them. You don't
Right.
want to just email back and forth. You actually want to talk to them. So even if you're using these other channels, the goal is to set up an appointment where you can talk to them.
Right. So, Wendy, we're going to set up some appointment call. And as you said, we're no longer getting into our cars. We're no longer having these appointments face to face if we used to. Phone call sets up, let's say, a Zoom call. So, our second call, our first initial serious conversation is going to be on Zoom after they said, yes, I'd like to talk to you. What other considerations come into play in that first meaningful conversation if it happens on Zoom?
Well, certainly if you're not used to doing Zoom, you're going to feel a little bit weird initially, but it's not actually all that different from being in front of the person. You maybe can't walk around their office and notice all the things they have in their office and chat about those things, but you're not there to do that anyways. You're there to have an in-depth conversation. Remember the definition of the word appointment. And I actually always start with the question, so what's going on? You know, when I called you, what's going on, or what did I say that made you decide that it made sense to take a few minutes so we could talk? And most people will just start to, tell you what's going on and why they want to talk to you, in which case you don't have to do a whole lot of heavy lifting. So that's where I recommend that you start.
Right, for sure. What other subtleties of this cold calling, prospecting? Because I think people hate prospecting of any kind. When we say, hey, prospect with some emails. Oh, God, no, I really don't like that. Hey, prospect on LinkedIn. Oh, boy, I don't want to do that either. Hey, prospect by picking up the phone. In our experience, in my experience, and why this is so important for trusted advisors, nothing good happens outside of a voice-to-voice conversation. Because here's the head trash. I'm a consultant. I'm an expert. Cold calling and prospecting in general is beneath me. They should come to me. Wendy, how busy and successful do I look if I'm cold calling every CEO in town? So we're kind of getting back into the head trash category, but this is what's killing some people's businesses. What's wrong with some of those mindsets and questions that I just laid out, that wrong-headed thinking?
Well, the first thing I would say is if you are indeed an expert and you can really help people, you're doing them a disservice by not letting them know you exist. That's the first thing. The second thing is that being on the phone enables you to make a human being to human being connection in real time. And it is under your control in a way that email or Facebook ads, that's not under your control. It's like you send out the email, you do the ads, whatever, you cross your fingers. You get someone on the phone, you can say what you have to say and react to whatever they say in real time. Here's the thing. This is a skill. We didn't talk about this before, but my first career, I danced in a ballet company. I knew nothing about business. I got into this because I needed a day job. But I got this day job with a telemarketing agency that did business development. And you know what? They taught me this skill. And learning this skill, and they taught me, they coached me, they held my hand, they kept me accountable. There's this myth of the born salesperson that some people they're born knowing what to do. And say, that's a myth. I'm not a born salesperson. I was just really lucky because I got this job they taught me. So this is a skill. It is not an intuitive skill, but it's a skill you can learn. And it's not hard. And I feel as service professionals, because I'm one as well, we have an obligation to let people know what we do. And if we do not let people know what we do, we're doing them a real disservice. And I will add to what I just said, in our training programs, when I work with clients, what we help business owners do is set up a system. And, right now, you might be the business owner, you might be the consultant, you're doing the business development yourself, you're making the calls. But here's the thing, if you have a system and you benchmark it, then you know what works. I mean, it's just like marketing. If you're really good at marketing, you track what you're doing.
Right.
You don't just send out a bunch of emails, cross your fingers and see what happens. You test, you track. We do the same thing with cold calling and prospecting. So if you're the business owner, and you have a system and you're tracking it and you benchmark it, eventually you can plug somebody else into that system. And that's one of the things that we do with our clients all the time, where maybe it starts out that they're the ones making the calls, but pretty quickly, once they prove the model, they start getting new business, they start getting busier, and they're able to hire someone else to do the calls.
Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. So this brings up a really interesting point, especially for consultants and trusted advisors and service professionals, which is, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, but I want to hear the Wendy Weiss rant about it. Wendy, can't my VA do this? Can't my admin just start this? I mean, don't train me, don't sign me up for your program. Sign up my VA and she'll do the cold call. She'll do the screening. She'll put the appointments on my calendar. And I just waltz in and I just take that second call because all the other front end grunt work is too much for me. Thoughts, comments, reactions?
Well, that is a model that can certainly work, but you still have to have that process. So you would need, as the business owner, you've got to be involved, at least initially, because you need the process, you need all the messaging, you need the scripts, and then you can train someone else to follow the process. The big mistake that I see this all the time, David, is business owners, consultants will say to me, "Oh, I want to hire a salesperson." And I say, "Great. What do you have in place for them?" "Oh, well, I'm going to hire a salesperson. They'll know what to do." No, they won't. That's a recipe for failure.
Oh my God. And how? So you cannot delegate what you cannot train, and you cannot train what you do not know. That's
Exactly.
the sequence. Like, you need to know it. You need to do it. You need to experience it, find all the wrinkles, find all the nuance, like you said, test the message, put some sort of system or process in place so that, the other complaint, by the way, is, Wendy, we do some cold calling, but every call kind of comes out different. That's because they're not using a script. They haven't thought about a system. They haven't thought about a process. And it's kind of cold calling gone wild. So maybe that's worth a little bit of a nuanced discussion. What's the difference? Because we've mentioned system and process a couple of times. What's the difference in the way that it feels, the way that it looks, and the way that it sounds when we have a cold calling system or process versus the cold calling gone wild? every call, let the chips fall where they may.
You're bringing up such an important point. It goes back to what we were just talking about, this idea of the born salesperson. And supposedly there are these people that are born, they're so charismatic and they have the gift of gab and they can just charm people or whatever. And people may indeed be born with talent. Tell you it takes 10 years to train a ballet dancer. You're not going to end up in a ballet company if you don't go to class. You might be a very talented athlete, but if you don't train with your coach, you're not going to the Olympics. And you might be very talented with great potential. You might find someone with great potential to be a salesperson, but without the training and the skill, they're just not going to be that successful. So, that's the first thing that I have to say. And the difference really is between just winging it all the way and having that system is you at a minimum double your numbers. We have a program that we call 3X appointments. We call it 3X because people that do this program that are already doing any kind of business development, typically their numbers triple. And what I mean by that is triple the number of qualified appointments. And then down the line, there's a corresponding increase in revenue because they've tripled the number of appointments with a heavy emphasis on the word qualified.
Yes, really, really important. Now, we are going to talk about your amazing bonus, but I want to lead into that by talking about this kind of current COVID crazy world that we are in. So we are in about month 8 of, COVID and
But who's counting?
Salespeople freaking out. Oh, I can't sell. I can't call. It's going to look insensitive. It's going to look like, I'm profiteering. And, oh my goodness, leave these poor prospects alone right now. And you have a fantastic resource, which we'll talk about in a moment. The parts of the title that I want to pull out right now is how do we get more qualified appointments when your prospects are all completely freaking out right now? So what's some of the new layers or nuance of this kind of crazy, turbulent turmoil and how we should approach these cold calls?
You have to think about what the situation that your prospects find themselves in. Not just, oh, everybody's freaking out, so I can't call them. Because if you can help them, you're doing them a disservice if you don't let them know. And the thing is that whatever it is you were doing previously, let's say you were cold calling previously. We see this a lot, clients coming to us now, because what they were doing pre-COVID, it wasn't resonating. So we have to adjust their messaging. So the question you want to ask yourself is, what are the new circumstances that prospects find themselves in? And how can you help them with that? And the hard part about this is putting yourself in the prospect's shoes because, and this is the hardest thing, it's not about what you do. It's about how they're better off when you finish doing whatever it is you do. And so some prospects are in completely changed circumstances. Others, maybe they're working remotely, but the rest isn't that changed. So you have to analyze what's going on in your market. And if the challenges have changed, what's the problem that they have that you can help them with today? And that's what you need to talk about.
And also, the thing that I think many consultants and trusted advisors are totally ignoring is, yes, some companies are hurting. We've had layoffs, we've had job loss, but some companies, other companies, are doing better than ever. So,
Yes.
if you're Zoom, for example, and we're using Zoom to record this, Zoom has had 10 times increase in their customer base, 10 times increase in their revenue. If you're in e-commerce, if you're in technology, if you're in any of these fields, if you're in package delivery services, right? This is the best thing. It sounds horrible to say this, but it's the best thing that's ever happened to your business because you're up 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x. And I think sales professionals need to understand there are people that need us now more than ever, and there are people that have more money now than ever. Not everyone is struggling, broke, and freaking out. Some people, they didn't have money to invest before with you, but they do have money to invest with you now. And that's what you said about do your homework.
Yeah. And it might be also that you need to make a shift that you're in market X, but at market X isn't doing well right now. So you've got to look for another market and go to market Y.
Yes, exactly right. It's not just change what you're saying. Sometimes it's change what you're doing. And like you said, change the messaging and change the
Exactly.
approach. So,
Exactly.
so good. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about this bonus because we want people to definitely tap into this. I'm going to give the full name now, even though we started talking about the COVID crazy and the clients freaking out. But this is a fantastic resource. It's the Business Owner's Guide to Scheduling More Qualified Appointments when their prospects are all completely freaking out, and 12 steps for finding sales opportunities today. Today, as in right now, in the present moment. Wendy, when people grab that, what will they get? Talk us through it.
Well, I wrote this because I kept hearing from so many of my clients that their prospects were freaking out. What do I do? And what do I say? And so these are 12 short, quick, actionable steps that you can take. I didn't want to write a whole war and peace to get new business. I wanted to write very pithy, succinct tips that you can read it, do it. Read the next one, do it. Read the next one, do it. So they're all actionable. And the goal is just to start finding opportunities today. There are a lot of businesses that when COVID first hit, they went, oh, we shouldn't do any prospecting because it's a bad time. And there are a lot of businesses that are still doing that. And you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing your potential clients a disservice because there are businesses out there that need your help today. You need to be reaching out to them.
And that's really one of the themes of this summit is that we need to be working in the new now. I don't like the new normal because there's nothing normal about what's going on. But the new now is we got to sell today. We got to sell tomorrow. We got to sell this week, right? A day doesn't go by where you don't have a sales responsibility to your consulting practice or to your company or to your spouse or kids, your dog or CPA or whoever's keeping track of your money. They want you to sell. And so I love this report, Wendy. It's super, super handy. People need to grab it. They need to grab it now. Where else can people get connected and stay connected to more of your brilliance?
Well, you can visit my website, which is coldcallingresults.com. You can send me a connection request on LinkedIn, or you know what? You could call me, 866-220-4242. I am a phone person. So if you call me and get voicemail, I will call you back. 866-220-4242.
I love it. Of course, the queen of cold calling would welcome a cold call from
Absolutely.
a Consulting Revenue Summit audience member. That's totally fantastic. Well, Wendy, thank you for being on. As always, you are fabulous.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.